Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into the absolute pressure cooker of 1946 and 1947. We're going to unpack the incredibly chaotic, emotionally charged, and just incredibly rapid transition of India from British colonial rule to independence. And specifically, we're going to figure out exactly why a united India, after decades of fighting together for freedom, was ultimately partitioned. It's a wildly complex story, but we're going to break down how this happened step by step.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The breaking point, 2. The Cabinet Mission Plan, 3. The Mountbatten Compromise, and 4. The birth of two nations.
All right, Section 1, the breaking point.
So, by the time 1945 and 46 roll around, following the end of the Second World War, the vibe in India had completely shifted. We're way past the point of polite political requests. The public was in this incredibly confident, determined mood. There were massive agitations, strikes, and demonstrations popping up all over the country, even in princely states like Hyderabad and Kashmir. People were galvanized by the struggle to release Indian National Army prisoners, and the message was loud and clear. They would no longer tolerate foreign rule, and they demanded immediate freedom.
Think about the sheer, undeniable pressure here. The British literally couldn't rely on Indians to police their own people anymore. In February 1946, the Indian naval ratings in Mumbai actually mutinied. We're talking about a 6-hour gun battle with British troops, and they only stood down because their own national leaders told them to. It didn't stop there either. You had widespread strikes in the Royal Indian Air Force, the Signal Corps, and even the very people keeping the colony running day to day, the police in Bihar and Delhi. Postal workers, telegraph operators, railway workers, all on strike. The entire colonial administrative machine was completely paralyzed from the inside out.
Seeing this laid out chronologically is honestly wild. Mutinies peak in early 1946, which forces the British Prime Minister, Clement Attlee, to immediately scramble and send a cabinet mission to India. Fast forward just a few months to 1947, a completely new plan, the Mountbatten Plan, has to be proposed. And by August of that exact same year, the country is partitioned and independent. We are talking about the complete unraveling of an empire and the redrawing of an entire subcontinent in roughly 18 months. 18 months!
Moving right along to Section 2, the Cabinet Mission Plan. So to desperately try and keep the country united, that cabinet mission, which was made up of 3 top British officials, pitched a 2-tiered federal setup. The absolute core of this idea was something called provincial autonomy. Basically, they wanted to create a federal union with a really weak central government that only handled the bare essentials: foreign affairs, defense, and communication. Every single other power would be handed directly down to the individual provinces. They essentially hoped this massive decentralization would be the magic bullet to satisfy everyone.
Well, spoiler alert, it wasn't. The whole thing totally broke down because the two major political forces, the Congress and the Muslim League, had completely different interpretations of the plan. The Congress was on board with the Constitution-making part, but absolutely refused to join the interim government under those specific rules. On the flip side, the Muslim League actually accepted the plan at first, but they only did it because the plan grouped Muslim-majority provinces into a bloc called Group B, which they viewed as a clear stepping stone toward a separate nation of Pakistan. The League later joined the interim government simply to throw a wrench in the works. With both sides at odds, a united, functional government was utterly impossible.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Mountbatten Compromise.
Things were getting incredibly tense. Large-scale riots were spreading, and a drastic pivot was absolutely crucial. Nationalist leader Sardar Patel summed up the grim reality perfectly when he noted that refusing the demand for Pakistan would essentially just divide the country into even more fragments. Patel and the Congress realized they were facing a terrible choice. They concluded it was better to have a smaller India with a strong central authority rather than a larger, united state that was constantly paralyzed or tearing itself apart in civil war. They reluctantly accepted partition as the agonizing, tragic price for immediate independence.
And you can really feel the weight of that monumental compromise when you look back at the actual transfer of power from Lord Mountbatten to Jawaharlal Nehru. Interestingly, this happened way earlier than anyone expected. The British had originally planned to hand over power in June of 1948, but because the situation on the ground was just so volatile, Lord Mountbatten slammed the fast-forward button. They made the call that the transfer of power and the partition of the country had to happen before August 15, 1947.
Finally, Section 4, Birth of Two Nations. To actually make this legally happen, the British Parliament passed the Indian Independence Act, which got royal assent in July 1947. This law outright mandated the creation of 2 separate independent dominions, India and Pakistan.
But just imagine the absolute logistical nightmare here. A boundary commission had to be thrown together immediately to figure out exactly where to draw the borders. On top of that, the massive provinces of Bengal and Punjab had to be geographically sliced up, assuming their provincial assemblies voted for it. They were trying to pull off the impossible, splitting an entire massive subcontinent in just a few short weeks.
And that frantic sprint brings us directly to the stroke of midnight on August 15, 1947. After years of relentless struggle, after the mutinies, and after a profoundly painful geographic separation, British rule was officially over. Jawaharlal Nehru famously announced that when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. It's a gorgeous, haunting thought, especially because we have to remember that this freedom was born out of immense, heartbreaking compromise.
So we've traced the incredible journey from the strikes of 46 all the way to that midnight hour in 47. Borders were drawn in a matter of weeks and power was handed over under the very real threat of a total civil war. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final thought. How do those incredibly rapid, painful decisions made under the ultimate pressure continue to define the borders, the politics, and the daily lives of millions of people in South Asia today? It's a piece of history that is honestly still breathing. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep exploring the why behind our world.